welcome to the Alabama Public Health Training Network. Thank you for joining us today for our program, Supervision Across Generations. If you have a question about anything being discussed today, please call or email during our broadcast. The phone number and email address are on your screen now and will appear again later in the program. Also, the handouts, sign-in sheet, and evaluation are all available online. You'll need to register for this program in order to access those materials. Continuing education credits have been approved for nurses and social workers for today's program. In order to receive credit for this training, you must watch the entire program, then complete and return the sign-in sheet and evaluation. While content may continue to be relevant, continuing education credit will only be awarded for 1 year for nurses, expiring on January 31st, 2018, and 2 years for social workers, expiring on January 31st, 2019. If you are watching this program on demand and want to receive a social work continuing education certificate, you'll need to complete the social work test and send it in along with your sign-in sheet and evaluation. If you are watching this program live, there is no social work test required. I'm Renee Carpenter, State Social Work Director for the Alabama Department of Public Health, and joining me is Sheila Blackshear, a former Assistant Social Work Director at ADPH. So welcome back, Sheila, and thank you for doing this program for us.
Thank you for the invitation. I feel like I'm coming home, coming back to Montgomery ADPH. It's a wonderful time for me to renew seeing people I've known in the past and also see new employees that have been hired since I've left the agency. So I'm going to be talking with you today mostly about millennials. And you've heard that term, you know about it, and if you have worked and supervised millennials, you may have a little feeling in your stomach, in your chest that says, oh, I remember that problem. So today I will be training you on some of the positives about all generations, but we're going to concentrate the majority of the time on millennials. My supervisor suggested that I do this and develop a training on millennials because I taught at a university where the students were in the 18 to 24 range, the majority of them, and we were having lots of very interesting experiences. One student wrote my supervisor and said, I have emailed Sheila Blackshear and she is not responding to me in a timely manner. So my supervisor, who was very supportive and had a good sense of humor, emailed me and said, what's going on? And I checked, and the student had written me an hour ago, and because I did not respond within the hour, she felt I was being inappropriate. The university allows us 2 days to respond to students because we have usually 300 to 400 enrolled in the part of social work that I was involved in. It's interesting, their perspective. If we can understand it better, we can hopefully avoid some of the issues and problems that might occur just because typically the supervisor is not going to be a millennial in a lot of agencies. Some are, and that's really wonderful, but not all. So this will hopefully help you get a little better handle. What I discovered after all my research and reviewing information was I can now smile when a millennial says, you didn't respond to me in a timely manner. And I'm thinking, okay, you just texted me 5 minutes ago. How untimely of me. And by just keeping my sense of humor, I could deal with it much better. So hopefully there will be some fun parts in these trainings that I will be doing. There will be some videos. I always have to do a disclaimer. There may be 1 or 2 cuss words. This is taken off the internet. It's not my personal production, but it helps us kind of look at millennials and say, oh, look at their strengths, look at their positives. We can do this and have a better agency, a better product by doing so. So we'll go This is just a brief, funny thing. As you're starting to do supervision with a millennial, the supervisor says, "So tell me, what work have you brought for me today?" And the student or the young millennial says, "Professor, the feng shui here is atrocious. It is essential for cosmic harmony that this supervision is postponed indefinitely." So perhaps they don't see a need for supervision. They don't have a desire for it in that particular thing. So look at this and see if you can recognize millennial behaviors in this and see if some of your employees, sometimes your children, your adolescent and 20s age child may be having these same behaviors that may be a little difficult for you. So I'll ask that we go ahead and start that video.
I'm a millennial.
I'm a millennial.
I'm a millennial and I'm not sorry.
And I'm not sorry. I graduated into a recession. I'm $30,000 in debt and student loans. And I own 11 pairs of shoes.
Every job I've ever had has bored me.
I'm frustrated. So somebody owes me an explanation.
I've literally never had a catch. With anyone. It's why I can't catch.
People said travel while you're young. Well, now I'm broke. Thanks.
I majored in history because I didn't want it to repeat.
I've never sacrificed anything.
I still have all my things waiting to be sacrificed.
I've kissed a guy. On principle.
I have strong opinions about literally everything. And I'm not afraid to share them on the internet.
My generation's outlook is worse than my parents'. That is not fair.
I had nothing to rebel against as a kid, and I won't stand for it anymore.
Thanks a lot, baby boomers.
Corporations have as many rights as I do, only they have a workforce of 1,000.
I'm a millennial. My life is like a delicate piece of art house cinema that I am constantly narrating, he declared bravely.
In Spain, healthcare is free.
I don't need to understand something to be against it.
Sweatshops, no. Oil, no. Genetically modified corn, no. Fracking, no.
Capitalism, no. Inequality, no.
Consumerism, no.
I don't donate my time. I don't donate my money. I donate my awareness.
When I see social injustice, I spring into action. I call my hacker syndicate and we take websites down.
I started a hashtag trend against the war in Iraq. Now I'm working on Syria.
Rob, if you're watching this, you're not my real father.
Thanks, baby boomers. Some people say I dance ironically. Sorry.
I don't know anybody who doesn't make art. I remix songs. All my shit's on SoundCloud.
I follow 11 socially important TV shows, but I also read when I'm in public.
I feel there's value in discussing. I think it's a valid and important topic to discuss. And this video, I'm really hoping will touch people and spark a little interest, spark a little dialogue, and ultimately bring people together.
Okay, so hopefully in the audience I've seen some grins, some laughter, and again our goal is to help bring a sense of humor at times, not to laugh at millennials, but sometimes to laugh at ourselves and how we view millennials and to help us work together better. So we start out looking to see what is a generation. And we're looking at a social cohort that is shaped by common experience and common persona. So if you identify with a particular group, and we'll be talking about several groups in this presentation, probably others will know that you belong to a particular group. The people are typically born over a period roughly the same time they pass from youth into adulthood, about a 20-year span. They share perceived membership, common beliefs and behaviors, and a common location in history. You often hear the term baby boomers, and everybody knows how old people are. approximate age range for people who are baby boomers. And when we hear millennials, you have that in mind too. Very youthful, often very bright individuals. So these are the different generations we'll talk about today. There are the traditionalists, so anyone born from 1900 to 1945, and we have 75 million of those people. Baby boomers, 1946 to 64, 80 million. Generation X, 1965 to 81, 46 million. And then millennials, 82 to the present, 76 million. So you can see where we have the larger numbers of individuals. A friend of mine who is in the Generation X said to me, "You don't have enough slides on us. You don't tell people about us enough. We need more attention." I said, "Okay, I'll adjust my PowerPoint." So I think we all want our say-so, our recognition of who we are, and it's a part of the generation that we belong to. So to define the generation, you typically are filling the social role being vacated by the somewhat older generation. So millennials are taking over as the X generation has aged a bit. Oftentimes they're trying to solve a problem that is facing a prior generation. If you think about consistent issues and problems, the environment, each generation says they want to improve the environment, they want to save our resources, and yet the next generation coming up has even more problems that they need to solve about the environment. So it's not that the previous generation ignored it, it's just there are so many issues. The generation corrects for behavioral excesses it perceives in the current midlife generation. So if you are active on Facebook, and as a baby boomer I am, you will see sometimes where people will say the previous generation did not pay attention to the environment. They did not try to improve things. And so now it's up to us to do it. And then baby boomers will respond on Facebook and start to name the different things that were done by baby boomer generation to try to improve the environment. So the perspectives are very different depending on what issue is discussed. So how do we look at a life cycle of a generation? Typically, the public will discover the new youth 15 to 20 years after the first birth year. So think of when you were 18 to 20, that was a point at which your generation would be recognized and what they were doing. As a baby boomer, I can remember in college, the males had very long hair. And my dad, who was a traditionalist, was appalled that men would have long hair. So that was his generation viewing my generation, and I just thought it was cool. So now in my 60s, I still think men who have long hair look cool, because that was what was occurring in my teens to early 20s and was a value that we had. Full possession of youth culture. There's a period of time, if you watch TV and see the commercials, and you can tell what age group they are trying to appeal to. There was a time when a lot of cigarette commercials were on TV. Of course, thank goodness we don't have that anymore. But at the time, they were playing to this is youthful, these people are cool, it's wonderful that they can be smoking whatever brand, and they have cool cars, they have cool dates, whatever. So whatever that youth culture values will oftentimes be appealed to by commercials. People want to make money, and they know the teens, people in their 20s, are at a point that they have spending money and will be using it to get things that feel good to them. These individuals will typically get maximum public attention for, say, 25 to 30 years. Baby boomers have been announced all kinds of things in the paper. We're going to have problems with health care because there are going to be too many baby boomers. We're going to have various issues because there are so many elderly. That's my generation. So I have to look and see, okay, is that the correct perspective or not? And that's what we'll be asking you to do as you're looking through this. After a period of time, by the time these individuals are 30, 35 years of age, public interest has gone to the next young generation. So it's like we're in vogue for a period of time, and then the next generation coming up is now the new thing. Frankly, I don't mind that baby boomers are less in the public eye right now. So some of you that are viewing this may be traditionalists. That means you were born from 1925 to 1945. For many of you, that could be your parents. And so these are some things that are typical of somebody in that age range. They feel lucky to have a job. Wow, what a perspective. They value patriotism, hard work, respect for leaders. They may feel outmoded at times, so they leave jobs and retire. In my lifetime, as we used computers more, as we went to computerized records and those kinds of things, there were some people who said, okay, it's time for me to retire. I really don't want to get into this. So I saw examples of that. I'm sure in all generations we will see different things that occur, and people think, okay, I don't want to do this technology, I don't want to do this new policy, so I'm going to retire. These are individuals who are typically very loyal to their workplace, very loyal to their supervisor, and look forward to retirement. So many of us had parents that worked 30, 40 years for the same company. And that is very much the mindset, the positive mindset of the traditionalists. Traditionalists would not consider moving and changing jobs every year. And yet that is the norm for another group of individuals. And I always like to see what TV program would they like, and they enjoy Murder, She Wrote. And the reason I think it's important, we're going to have this on each group, is just to see area of interest. If you supervise a traditionalist, you may need to watch Murder, She Wrote and see what traditionalists are viewing and seeing. We also do that with our children. We view our grandchildren. Are they watching comics today? Are they watching TV programs with more violence or whatever? The more we know about that generation, the better. So I would assume there would be a few traditionalists who are employed at public health, but they would be in the minority just because of the age. As we go through these, I want you to be thinking about how you might fit, how your parents might fit into this, and if you are a supervisor, how the people you supervise will fit into this. And if you have excellent examples or questions, I would love for you to speak out here in the audience, as well as call in or email, because that's how we learn even more. Some of you may have had a wonderful experience with a traditionalist, and that will give others inspiration that they can too. And when we get to the millennials, some of you may have had great experiences with millennials, and that experience will help others as well. So with the traditionalists, we typically think these are people who were shaped by the Great Depression and World War II. So many of these individuals saved money when they had a minimum amount of money coming in. So when they were about to retire, they had nest eggs that could support their families, because that was an ethic that was very well embedded. If you went through the Great Depression, if you went through WW2, you had those type values. Some of you may have had to help clean out your grandparents' houses and found that they saved 4,000 paper bags in case they were needed. Little bits of thread, little bits of things that most of us today would simply throw away. There isn't enough to use later. But because of their life experiences, they learn to save everything. These individuals are typically conservative and rule-oriented. If there is a policy and procedure manual, traditionalists know it. They have used that policy manual a good bit, and they readily comply because they see that as an important part of what they do. Again, that is just for traditionalists. We'll see how this affects others as we go through this. They prefer consistent top-down management and long-term employment. So if you are a son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter and you graduate from college and you take a first job, and then after a year or two you decide you can improve your situation and move to another job, that may be horrific to traditionalists because you're not building up retirement, you're not going to be saving for the future, all the things that for traditionalists are very important. They are typically loyal and self-sacrificing. So if public health hired them, they may decide this is the only employer that I want to have, and I will remain here for 25, 30, 40, however many years until I retire. That is a wonderful thing. As a supervisor, you can depend a lot of times that these will not be people who will be going to another job because they can get 50 cents more an hour. So that is a real strength of this group of individuals. They often value family and patriotism, which we would expect from their life experiences of Great Depression and World War II. So this is a group, you may not have a lot of people to supervise in this, but it's just good to be aware of the individuals, what issues, how they view the world, because that's going to affect the things that they do and say in the workplace, how they value clients, and how they value their jobs. They are very respectful of authority and extremely loyal. They tend to do the right thing, whatever their viewpoint says is the right thing. Some of the stereotypes focus on negatives. Sometimes if you've worked in an agency for many years, you may know the many problems that can come up. Does that make you negative, or does that mean you understand the dynamics of the past 30 years? They may be narcissistic at times, very into themselves. I don't see that a whole lot. And selfishness into what is important to them, and sometimes too individualistic. because if they think something is right, that's the way they're going to do it, even though everybody else who works that shift, who works that program, may be choosing a different way to view something. So if they feel they're in the right, they will continue in that. So if you are supervising that person, having to work with their security and knowledge of what they think is right sometimes takes a lot of extra effort and work. As you supervise, it's important to have all generations respected and to accommodate for differences. So if you hire someone at ADPH who is right out of college and you talk with them and you come up with a plan for their training and what they need, it may include all kinds of things. The basics that we do. If you work in healthcare, you've learned how to wash your hands 1,000,000 times. You know the songs to sing for so many seconds to make sure that you are very well clean as you start your progress with your clients and patients. There are certain things, OSHA, sometimes that we have to have training in. So all those are very specific. But if you have a traditionalist that has worked with clients for 30 years, they probably don't need to know some basic things like interviewing skills with patients or clients. If they don't have those skills at this point, you're in trouble. So it helps if you can recognize the differences and allow for specific trainings for what they need. Maybe they need to attend an advanced conference where they can learn special skills that they can come back and train other individuals in the workplace. Traditionalists tend to focus on the strengths of the supervisor and the supervisee. So it can be a very positive approach. If you're a traditionalist, then you can see the strengths of the individuals you supervise. Or if you are a traditionalist and you are the supervisee, you can see the positives of your supervisor quite readily. And that can be kind of exciting if you are working with individuals, some who may or may not be happy with you as a supervisor. You can depend on the traditionalist to give you lots of positives and support for your role as a supervisor. Now, we'll be starting to talk about baby boomers. Does anybody have questions or anything they want to share about supervising a traditionalist?
So I would think they would also be very, maybe not accepting of change. Is that an accurate statement?
That's very good. Those of us who work in agencies know change is going to be happening all the time. And if an employee can learn to go with the flow, it makes their lives easier. It definitely makes the supervisor's lives easier, because as a supervisor, you're having to encourage everyone to follow the new policy, to follow the new instructions, whatever they are. And traditionalists will typically want to be in line to follow orders, to follow policies, but they also may say, but I know a better way, so I'm going to do it this way. And as a supervisor, you have to help them be encouraged to do what is the new policy. I've heard some really good supervisors say, this may not be a policy you like, it may not be a policy I like, but this is the policy, so therefore we will do this. If you see any problems or issues or concerns, let me know, and I will forward that up the chain of command so that others can recognize what some of the problems may be. Some of the best information we get, I think, comes from direct line workers who are with the patients and clients delivering services, and as they identify issues, one of the roles of the supervisor is to make sure administration is aware of it. Not that they can always respond quickly and make big changes, but in future planning they may be able to include some of the ideas and things that the traditionalists may have suggested, but also millennials, X generation may have suggested as well. But change is important, certainly for all generations, but you're right, for the traditionalists, I think it may be some of the hardest. You finally get your job down, you've done it this way for the last 10 years, and now they want you to use a whole new computer system, a whole new set of paperwork, whatever, and that makes for lots of change. Baby boomers. So what do they know about the baby boomer generation? And these would be young people who were born after World War II up into the 60s. Typically, we would be competitive, idealistic. Our parents will have told us we could do anything. If you want to be President of the United States, you can be. How many of you in the audience heard that growing up? I'm getting some nods, okay. And, you know, that's not a bad thing to hear, because it says, hey, you're a competent young person and you can do lots of things. But realistically now, can anybody become president? Not really. If you don't have financial backing, if you don't have a certain level of education, that kind of thing. So perhaps some of that was a little overdone, and we'll get into millennials where it was definitely overdone. We want to make a real statement in the workplace. We want to be known as a good worker, as somebody who understands poverty, who understands medical issues that are important to our agency and our clients. Many baby boomers do not plan to retire. You've probably read some articles and seen in the newspaper people are working into their 70s, some into their 80s. Is it because they love their work and they never want to retire? I'm sure if they work at ADPH, that may be part of it. But it also has to do with the economy. People who used to be able to retire at a certain age are seeing more and more they may not be able to make it financially. Typically, baby boomers would be optimistic. Now, that's not always true of all baby boomers, but a lot of them are. Think about it. If you were born after a big war and your parents were so hopeful and telling you that you could become president or whatever you want to do, there would be this optimism that you're growing up with. And the TV shows that baby boomers typically enjoy are 30-something. Anybody watch that?
I'm not a baby boomer. I'm still 30.
Okay, all right. And there are some people who cross over between generations. As a baby boomer, that's not been a program I enjoyed. I like Murder, She Wrote. So I'm perhaps an older soul, back with the traditionalists. But it just helps to see what each generation enjoys, experiences, because that is a part of who they are. Now, Generation X. They grew up seeing too many businesses downsize and merge. The number of banks, credit unions that suddenly were in major difficulty had to close. That was the norm as they were growing up. And they recognize you can't trust permanency in the workplace. They saw parents who were downsized, parents who were on track to retire from a certain institution, agency, whatever, and suddenly were on unemployment and frantically trying to get new jobs at whatever pay they could get. So you can see the amount of uncertainty in their lives could contribute to how they feel about the workplace. They doubt that Social Security will be available to them. Well, they're not the only generation that has that doubt. And they want industry to adapt to them. Sometimes they will say things like, I'm a working mother, my child gets out of school at 3 o'clock, my time needs to be adjusted to 7 to 3 so I can be home for my child to get off the bus. Well, if you work at ADPH, that may not work with the clinics. It may not work with the job demands that you have. So the lack of adaptability in industry and agencies often can frustrate Generation X. This particular generation tends to be skeptical. You can see why. Their parents have had so much uncertainty, businesses uncertainty. So, you know, what makes me think that life is going to be good? So this group, again, for whatever reason, doesn't get a lot of press. And my friends that are in Generation X talk about that. Everybody talks about baby boomers, millennials. They don't give us much information. They don't really give us attention. So that generation perhaps is a little more quiet, a little less vocal about things, and maybe less numbers as well. So this group can be a good group to supervise, but don't expect them to have high expectations that everything's going to go well and that the agency is going to do well, because their viewpoint is going to be skewed to a more skeptical type outlook. Okay, their TV program that they enjoy a lot is Melrose Place. Anybody a big Melrose Place fan in the audience? Okay, got several that are. So that just gives you an idea of what kinds of things entertain or interest them. One of the things they may need training on is how to give and receive feedback. So if you have a supervisor who is Generation X, you may have to ask for feedback. And when you ask for it, it may not be in the best format. There are ways to give feedback. And as supervisors, we know sometimes our feedback is, good job, keep up the good work, but it's not always that. Sometimes there are errors, sometimes there's a lack of productivity, and that has to be handled in supervision. So there's a technique that we suggest people use called the sandwich technique, and you've probably heard of that. As a supervisor, you give a positive. I've noticed that your QA reports are showing that you are very accurate in providing services to the clients. You are also very thorough in your write-up, whatever. And then you put in, but I notice you've called in 4 times in the last month. And so even though when you're here you're very productive and doing a great job, the call-ins mean someone else has to cover and do your job, and that can be very stressful for the others. We already are at kind of a low staff rating. I haven't asked today if y'all are 100% in nurses, social workers at public health, but most agencies there are openings, people are having to do more with less. That terminology got old pretty fast with agencies. Okay, we're going to give you the same amount of money we did last year, but we're going to give you 2,000 more clients. Good luck. Those are the kinds of things that agencies have been dealing with for years. And public health, I assume, continues to have those issues too. The legislature doesn't always give the amount of money that's needed for anything from the immunization programs to emergency preparedness or whatever program that you are involved in at ADPH. So if you ask for feedback from a supervisor who is in Generation X, just be aware it may not be quite in the way that you would like. But the sandwich technique is a good technique to use. So if you're part of Generation X, as you give the positive, then you mention the negative, needs to improve. But by the end of the supervision talk, you need to come up with another positive. I like that you have decided you're going to participate in this new program we're having. I like that you volunteered to let the students shadow you as you're doing a clinic, whatever. So the idea is you start positive, you give the feedback that's constructive criticism, and then you give more positive so that as they're walking out your door, they may be saying, so my call-ins are a problem, but she does know that I'm doing a good job when I'm here. And that hopefully leads to improvement in the area that is not so good. If we do a good self-evaluation, we all have areas we need to work on. And I've always had a boss. There are very few people in this world who don't have a supervisor or boss, and they're often able to recognize our weaknesses even before we do. So just be as receptive as you can be to that. And if your Generation X supervisor is not good at giving feedback, try to ask for it in a positive way. And sometimes supervisors learn by the example of the supervisees. So you too can use the sandwich technique. I really like that as a supervisor, you take time with me after each clinic or once a month or whatever. And, that's important to me, and you always do that. I just feel that it's important I get a little more one-on-one with you so I can get some feedback on my progress as a supervisor, my progress working with the patients or clients, and thanks for taking the time today to meet with me because it wasn't on schedule. So we can practice the sandwich technique as a supervisee, which hopefully, if we have good supervisors, they learn from us too. So try not to just be negative with the supervisor because they too can respond to positive techniques when we use it. Let me ask, in this group, how many of you have been supervisors? Just raise your hand. Okay. How many of you received training on supervision before you became a supervisor? 2 of the maybe 8 or 10. So what typically happens in agencies is you're a very good worker. You give quality work to your clients and patients. You're loyal to the agency. You document well. By golly, we're going to make you a supervisor. Sounds logical, doesn't it? But what happens is that's a skill set to be the direct caregiver, but then there's another skill set that it takes to be a supervisor. Some of the things are similar, but some are very different. And without training, oftentimes, I know myself, I made errors because I was promoted and told you are now director of this or director of that. Well, that's cool, but how do I get people to buy into the job, the objectives, the unbelievable caseloads at every agency that I've worked in, and probably you have too. So there's so much to being a supervisor, and typically there's not much time given to train us to be good supervisors. The Board of Social Work, just in the last year, has recommended and has gotten approval that if you are a supervisor, you have to get 3 hours of training. So the training that you get today, and you can get on another a video of training on supervision, will meet that requirement. But wow, how many years have people worked when that wasn't a requirement for our license? Some agencies are really good at providing that, but many feel they are so strapped money-wise, they don't have the money, the inclination to do that. You can just learn. You're a bright worker, you can do this. And we have done it through the years. But there's a lot of literature, a lot of articles and things, a lot of training that you can get on supervision that will help you fine-tune your skills. And especially for new supervisors, I think it's critical. Some of you are cuspers. Sounds like a bad word, but what it means is you have certain attributes, certain strengths that would be between two of the different generations. People who are cuspers tend to be good at mediating. Many nurses, many social workers, many administrators are good at mediating. When they have employees that are at odds, that are angry, upset about whatever, they're able to get those individuals to sit, talk about it, work things out. They're also good at translating. If and I'm not talking into another language, but sometimes it may be hard for traditionalists to understand why we have a new policy. But the baby boomer may be able to assist that person to understand it better, knowing they have some of the same attributes. So play to your strengths. If you have cuspers, attributes between two generations, use that in a positive way as you supervise people in different generations. Cuspers make great mentors. I think the way people have survived and done well as supervisors is they look to see who did this well, who was a supervisor that supervised them well. They tried to take parts of that and incorporate that into their own style. And they also were always open to learning new things, going to trainings, being part of a pilot project. You know, through the years, I sometimes would sort of just start shaking if somebody said, we're going to have a pilot project and we want your county to do it. And I would go, oh, really? Because it was kind of scary. Now, there are a lot of positives about doing a pilot project. You know the information, you get to make recommendations. It's a lot of positives, and it's a lot of work. Whereas the other counties who may not be having to participate can sit back and say, okay, so how's it going? Yeah, you look pretty tired. I noticed your car doesn't leave the health department till 7 p.m. But it can be a very positive as you're learning and developing a new program. So mentors are very important, I think, as we learn how to supervise. They make great managers. If you have attributes from two generations, then you naturally will do well with those two. So then that gives you more time to devote to developing skills for other generations that you have less in common with. I've had some wonderful experiences with supervisors that were a lot older than me. And then I've had supervisors that were a lot younger than me. I must admit, the day one of my supervisors said, "You remind me of my mother so much," and they said it in that tone, I knew they didn't like their mother. So I knew I was in for trouble. So part of what we have to do is be aware that our biases, our thoughts and opinions about things can really interfere with being a supervisor. If somebody you supervise reminds you of your mother, of your child that's always in trouble, any of those kind of cliches, then be aware that that may affect how you relate to them, how you grade them on their yearly evaluations, and just that knowledge can help you overcome that bias so you can be a better supervisor. Now we are to the heart of the matter, millennials. And for this presentation materials that I'll talk about, we would say these people could be born from anywhere from 1982 to 2000. Different pieces of literature will give you slightly different ages, but the bottom line is these are the youthful, young employees coming. They may be right out of high school, right out of any type of specialized training, the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year BSN, various levels of nursing. But if they're just completing that, they typically will be millennials. Sometimes we have older students that go back to school and get degrees, but a lot of times it's going to be the typically younger folks. They grew up in a very child-focused world. Parents wanted that child to do well. They devoted their efforts toward that child. Baby boomers, their parents were so busy making a living, they weren't able to devote hours and hours. It was like, okay, by the way, do your homework. And they were out the door going to their second job. These parents of millennials may sit and do homework with the children, may do it for them. Have you ever been to a science fair and you knew which parents had completed those science projects? And the ones that looked sometimes pitiful, sometimes less well done, those parents had said, you got to do it yourselves. Teachers know that. I kept thinking, why do they keep having them do projects when they know the parents are doing them all? And millennials definitely have had this supervision, this parenting, often going into overdrive. Parents of millennials are often fearful of their safety. They are strong advocates for their success, and they may be helicopter pilots, helicopter parents. I taught at the university part-time and for 30-something years, and when I first started teaching, it never occurred to me that parents would call me to question a grade I was giving their child. The last 5 years that I taught, I have multiple parents calling. I'm Johnny's parent, and I'm just wanting you to know that he's never made anything but A++, and the B you gave him is not appropriate. Really? And so then we would talk, and I would look back on my grade book, and okay, he missed 6 classes. Well, he was probably sick. Well, we have a procedure. They can hand in a medical excuse, and we don't count it against them. I don't have any medical excuses for your son. Well, I'm sure he was sick. He might have had a hangover, but that was sick, right? Not really. So it's amazing. And I had parents who wanted to have a conference with me, not with their child present, but with them, to explain to me their child needed perfect scores, perfect grades, because their next step was going to be law school or whatever. Not, is my child earning this grade? What is he or she doing that means he got an A- instead of an A+? Often I had students at the end that would question if I marked off -0.25, a quarter of a point And at the end of the semester, that's rounded up. So they still got very good grades, but they didn't get perfect grades. So expectations in this group can be quite large. Now, some of these things are outstanding and positive. They can be confident and optimistic. That's great. You can train them. They can start working the floor, going to see clients. They have a sense of confidence that enables them to do that. Often they're team-oriented. They're used to having group activities. You know, the group dating scene. People don't just have one person that they date. It's like, well, the group is going to an activity. Well, that can be wonderful, but it may mean they're not developing individual skills. So if they have to sit in a cubicle and do certain things all by themselves, that may be harder for them. Achieving, they're used to very high stakes testing and zero tolerance behavior policies. So they know the ACT score they have to get in the college that they want. Nowadays, I understand they can take those very early, so they get the practice. So by the time they're about to graduate, they should have developed really good skills at test taking. You know, I applaud that. That's great. But it's a lot of pressure on these young people. The last few years I was teaching, I taught some freshmen and sophomores. It was amazing the amount of pressure they were feeling from within, from parents, that they had to be perfect. So they didn't want an A- or an A, they wanted an A+. And at the university where I taught, undergrads could make minuses, straight A's, or A+. I really didn't like that system. It seemed to set them up to want even more to be the perfectionist. Many of these individuals feel pressured. They are trophy children. They may be a cheerleader, they have ballet classes, don't forget piano lessons, the band. You know, they're in so many things. And parents have such great intentions. They want their child to be exposed to wonderful things they can do. But I often see in columns where teachers are saying, why don't you at least have one day that they don't have activities scheduled, that they can go home, climb a tree, go for a walk, ride a bicycle. What many of them do, of course, is get on the iPad or the computer. And that's okay. That's a choice. That's something they're doing and they enjoy. But let it be something that they choose to do. That may be hard for many of the parents of millennials. Many of these young people have excellent manners, are comfortable with their parents' values. If my parents believe in giving to charity, I believe in doing that. If my parents believe in, it may be religious values, different values they share with the parents, and they're fine with that. Other generations, such as baby boomers, you know, we wanted to do the opposite of what our parents wanted. But this group appears to have more comfort and are relaxed with their parents. That's wonderful. Leads to less conflict. As a therapist, I think that's wonderful. But it may mean less variability in beliefs, systems, and thoughts. The millennials are typically high school grads in the year 2000 and older. So what do we know about millennials? Typically, they will have older parents, smaller families. Baby boomers, a lot of times, were from large families, many siblings. So this may be an only child or a two-child home. 40% of the millennials are firstborns. So what do we know about firstborns? If you've read about the firstborn child, what do we know about them?
They're usually more responsible.
Typically, very responsible. Often, they are the high achievers in the family. If there's going to be a PhD, if there's going to be a doctor, a lawyer, typically it is the firstborn. Now that may sound really cool, and I guess it is, but a lot of times what it means is we pressure that first child. We want them to be so good, so perfect, so into these positive things. By the middle child, we kind of relax, you know. Yeah, it'd be nice if they go to college, but, you know, it's not totally necessary. By the time the third child comes along, isn't he or she cute? They're just delightful. We enjoy them. We may not give those same high expectations. So a lot of things has to do with the birthplace order. There's lots of research and books on that. I find it fascinating. But you will find an occasional baby in the family who becomes a judge, a physician. So it doesn't hold true all the time. But if you look at percentages, it does. Firstborns typically will have the most education of their siblings. Many of these young people have very educated parents. They may have master's degrees or above, and they have high expectations for children. The family patterns are pretty stable. In previous generations with traditionalists, people didn't live as long, parents died early. With baby boomers, we started seeing more divorces, separations, so a lot of the family dynamics were changing. With millennials, we're seeing a more set family pattern. We have more diversity culturally. We have more immigrant parents, so we have diversity in our millennials, which is wonderful. Looking at who these individuals are as millennials, by 1998, the mothers who had college degrees were up from 20% to 41%, and the fathers with college degrees were up to 44%. So we're having better educated parents that are having these children. This is a millennial baby. No place to hide, always being watched, even in the crib, where you think nothing should be going on. We've got the cameras. We've got all sorts of things to make sure. Is he safe? Is he okay? Or she? So this is the way their life starts, and then it continues with the hovering parents. So these are millennials through the years. In the 70s, people said, this could be my generation, my parents are fast as pigs. You know, we wanted to act out toward our parents. Their values were not ours, whatever. 1980, my friends are sold out hypocrites. 1990, my students are greedy materialists. And 2000, my children will save us all. And actually, I do think millennials are going to make some very big contributions to save our Earth, to save our planet. You know, so many things that have to be resolved or at least bettered in this generation. So you see how many millennials we have that are aged 15 to 24. Large numbers, peaks in that. So millennials are not going away. It's important for us to recognize them, understand them, and work with them in the workplace. So we have another video see if you can identify these millennials and what they are experiencing that sounds familiar from the talk.
Millennial.
I'm a millennial, and I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry.
We suck, and we know it.
We're self-centered. We're entitled. We're narcissistic, lazy, and immature.
And we're super sorry about that.
We're the worst. If only we could be more like our parents.
Yeah, the baby boomers. You guys were great.
You gave us great music.
60s counterculture.
Psychedelic drugs.
A lot of great movies, too.
Jurassic Park was awesome. Good job with that one.
We don't know what happened. You raised us to believe that we were special.
So special that we didn't even have to do anything to earn it.
I got this trophy for existing in soccer.
That's pretty special.
No idea what went wrong.
You tried your best. You insisted we all go to college, and now we're the most educated generation in American history.
Sure, college costs 600% more than it did when you went. And yes, we averaged like $30,000 in student loan debt.
But here we go again, making excuses. We're so lazy.
Instead of living in our parents' basements and waiting tables, we should just go and get real jobs, like you did.
I mean, not a job in manufacturing since those all got outsourced in the 90s.
Man, the 90s were great. Do you guys remember Full House? It's a good show.
We graduated into a recession, and 90% of the jobs created since 2009 are part-time. But let's be honest, we just don't like hard work.
Hey, what was the deal with that recession anyway?
I think it had something to do with the housing bubble that started in the 90s. I don't know, I was still pretty young back then.
Oh, and we're really sorry about messing up those 2 wars you guys started. Sorry so many of our friends died.
We just can't do anything right.
We're really sorry we suck so much.
I mean, it's not like we jacked up college tuition prices or
Destroyed the manufacturing industry.
Started 2 quagmire wars.
gutted the unions.
Destroyed the global economy.
And left our offspring with an environmentally devastated planet stripped of its natural resources.
Man, it'd be crazy if there was a generation that recklessly awful, huh?
But we do text too much. Ugh.
I know, right?
So on behalf of all the millennials, we'd like to apologize for being so terrible. From now on, we're going to be just like the baby boomers.
Because you guys, you nailed it.
One of the things I like about the videos about millennials, there's so much creativity. There's so much openness about all kinds of things. And because they're talking about themselves, we can really see their understanding. And it helps us understand, yeah, they have student loans that are unbelievable. They have a hard time getting into the workplace. Many of them, after they graduate college, remain in the parents' home. And some are eventually getting jobs. Some may have to go into a different situation altogether. Right now, it's popular on campus to go into the Peace Corps. America teaches different programs where if you have a new degree and you don't have a job, you can sign up to go work in a school system in an impoverished area. You get an impoverished salary, but you get the most wonderful experience that you can build on. And many students that I saw in social work were beginning to look to that. Like, this is an opportunity for me to grow and develop. No, it's not $60,000 a year like my dad wants me to have, my mother, and I'd like that lifestyle, but it's not going to happen, so this is what I'm going to do. So I see them making really good choices and using creativity as they work in a system that's not real user-friendly for new jobs, new graduates. So what do these millennials want? They want flexibility and balance. So don't be surprised if you, as a supervisor, interview people for positions and they start asking you about hours. Are there flexible hours? Can I work from home? Can I do a lot of things? And I haven't talked to my friends at Public Health recently, but my guess is you're still doing lots of clinics, lots of patient-client contacts, home visits, so that working from home may not be that much of an option. In other types of agencies, it is in the business world. So they're getting some of that there. They're really interested in balance, and I see this as a big strength. Many of us went into the helping professionals because in the helping profession because we are dedicated to helping others, making a difference. So if we had to work over, if we had to go in on weekends, if we had to do certain things, we were committed in doing that. What I find with many millennials is I like to work 4 days and then have a 3-day weekend. And some jobs may be able to accommodate that. That's wonderful. I will not be working any overtime. My family has to come first. Wow, if they have that type of commitment to family at such an early age, that's wonderful. Many of us were committed to family, but we also knew we had to be so very committed to a job as well. So I see it as a positive. It just is not always real user-friendly in the workplace. They want frequent, timely feedback. One of my students requested to meet every day with her supervisor. And it was hard for her to understand that that really wasn't possible. Now, you know, the first week that you have a new employee or a student, you may have to have daily meetings just to make sure they're getting orientation, they're understanding it, whatever. But 1 or 2 weeks into that, it's got to be whatever is the norm. If it's a weekly supervision, if it's a monthly group supervision, whatever, but it can't be immediate. They want a fun workplace. And if you think about it, you've all probably had several different jobs in your lifetime, maybe worked in different counties, different programs. Some groups really work well together. They're like a well-oiled machine that just puts out the work, and in between clients and patients, they say jokes, they have a good time, somebody cooks and brings in some good food. It's just a very supportive work environment. On the other hand, I've worked in work environments where people didn't like each other, didn't speak to each other. In front of the clients or patients, they did what they were supposed to do, but as soon as the patient or client was gone, they didn't speak. Or if they did speak, it was not nicely. So it's really important to have a worker-friendly atmosphere for these individuals. And they want meaningful work. Just as in college, students will say, don't give me busy work. I want to do real work. Well, that's cool. That's wonderful. And in the workplace, if you've worked several years, you know there are a lot of things we have to do that are not real fun and exciting. I've worked in places where at times I had to empty the garbage. We didn't have a contract for that. Maybe I had to sometimes mop up when my clients had accidents. You know, things that we just jump in and do because it's part of what we do at our agency. But it's really important for the millennials to see that they are doing something meaningful. They also want to try new roles. Many times, new employees want to know their direct patient care role, but, you know, could I go to some of the supervisory meetings? Could I go to some administrative meetings and see what goes on? If you can accommodate that, it really helps that person feel more involved, more into the agency, and that they will be able to stay. Some public health, when I've talked to supervisors, have been able to do that. Others, it may not be an area that is real responsive to that, and they feel that it would not be good for the student to go in. Maybe they're talking about layoffs. Maybe they're talking about very confidential information that a student really doesn't need to be exposed to their first few weeks in the job. So a lot of times there's a lot of good reasons not to do that, but if you can accommodate that, that really helps them. Millennials score very high on assertiveness and self-liking. Recently, a 25-year-old young man was hired in an agency, and I had to go in and talk to him about something, and I walked in. He had brand new furniture. He had 2 large screen computers side by side. He was a secretary, and I knew a lot of long-term faculty could not get a chair that fit them, could not get a desk that was better equipped for them, and never were given a new computer or 2 new computers. So, being the baby boomer that I am, I said, wow, how do you rate all this stuff? He said, you know, I ask, but really I don't ask. I tell them what I need to do a good job, and they get it. Well, because of his assertiveness, because they really liked him and wanted to keep him, they did agree to those things. Perhaps they didn't like the people that were working there for 20, 25 years. Perhaps they didn't mind if they went ahead and retired. But he was coming in, and they wanted to keep him, so they met some of those. They often have high expectations. So how soon do I get a raise? I think I need a promotion. This same individual said to me one day, I don't have time to answer my phone. I'm too busy. I need a secretary to do my emails and phone calls. I'm like, really? That's what he was supposedly hired for. But, you know, he has helpers that do that now. Very assertive. Now, he's a very likable young man. I enjoy working with him. But it's just a total different view of the world. They do have some level of stress and anxiety. You may not pick up on that right away, but it does have an interplay, because with those hovering parents, those high expectations, there are a lot of times, if you're asking them to do a new activity, a new something that they don't feel confident in, they may feel extra stress. So just be aware of that. Confidence, assertiveness is good, but don't forget the other part of the individual. They score lower on self-reliance. And you remember I said earlier, they do great things in groups. They like group activities. They like group projects. You put them in front of a computer in a cubicle and say, this is the expectation, this is what I want, whatever. And they're like, really? Because doing one themselves, being totally self-reliant, is not something that has been encouraged in their world. They need structured but interactive learning experiences. As I'm lecturing today, because this is kind of the medium that we use, this does not really do well with millennials. Their preference style of learning is going to be much more interactive, much more, okay, here's an activity to help you do this, whatever. They sometimes need a review of overconfidence. Recently, a new worker in an agency was complaining that she wasn't being able to be independent and go do certain meetings on her own. And so the supervisor knew she wasn't really ready, but she didn't say that. She said, well, okay, so if I were going to send you to this agency to do this particular activity, how would you plan that? And she looked at her and said, "Planet? Who would you contact?" Do I contact people? So she helped the person realize, although she had the energy, the enthusiasm, definitely was bright enough to do it, she hadn't actually seen all the steps that go into it. So sometimes we have to help them understand that in whatever skill, whatever way we do that best. They need specific instructions, frequent feedback, and relevance of the material. If they think you're giving them busy work, you can forget it. Many of us, when we started at agencies, I think, had the experience that I did, which was sitting in a room for a week or two reading the policy manual. Oh my gosh, I was afraid I was going to fall asleep and the supervisor would come in, see me napping, and fire me. But it's really hard to read policies for 8 hours straight. And certainly retaining them after that is hard. So today, new employees will come in and say, could I read a few policies and then go out with a worker and see what you do and see the policies in action? That gives you good feedback. That's a good way for them to learn. Can I shadow a worker in clinic? Can I read notes of somebody who has done this job? All those are good learning experiences for them. They need to know the relevance of the material. Once I read this, how is that going to help? They prefer shorter segments of instruction. This hour and a half is way too long. Probably 20 minutes something. It can be PowerPoint, but preferably YouTube videos, kinds of things that they're used to. They're used to media. They're used to being bombarded with lots of information, and that's their preference at that point. They need to know that rules are strictly enforced to prevent entitlement issues. So if your agency says 8 o'clock is when you have to be here, and you let any person slide on that, then they're going to assume they can slide on that. So you have to be very careful and make sure you are enforcing rules and regulations with everybody. So who are our employees? We've got different cultures, different practice experience, new employees right out of a school setting versus somebody with 20 years experience, a lot of variability there, socioeconomic background. Sometimes individuals who grew up in poverty can really be positive in interacting with our clients who have less income. On the other hand, sometimes somebody who's had lots of income, well-educated parents may also have very good skills. So we can't assume one or the other will enable them to interact well. Educational achievement, the more variability, the better the supervisor has to be. With social work, you can have a bachelor's in social work or a master's. With nursing, there are lots of different degrees, and knowing as a nurse supervisor what expectations you can have of each one. Yes, there are a lot of commonalities, but there are also some specific things that they may not get in a 2-year program or a 3-year program versus a 4-year. Age, which may range from 20-year-olds to students in their 60s. So some of you will be supervising somebody who is the same age as your mother, the same age as your young children. I say young, 20s, that's young to me. But be aware that how we relate to these people may be very similar to how we relate to them in our life. So not to say we aren't all perfect, but we all have our baggage. We all have family members that we would just as soon not be with 24 hours a day. And those are the employees that may stress you out the most. Just keeping in mind where the person is developmentally across the lifespan. Does the age of the employee present challenges in the supervision process? Depending on your age and the supervisee's age, yes. But being aware of it and working on that is what we have to do. How we communicate. Some people prefer emails. Some people prefer, we're right next door to each other, can I come in and ask a question? Defining that, saying what's okay when. Open door policies are always good. The structure that you have in the process is important. For licensure, in social work, we have to meet once a week for them to get their next license. We can also do some group supervision as well as individual. And in nursing, a lot of times I see group meetings to make sure everybody gets communication, gets information. I don't see so much one-on-one because the system is not set up for that cost. Look at how much structure is needed in supervision. Do you have to tell the person, bring your questions, bring concerns, bring anything you need to supervision so we can work on it? So how do we turn things into a positive? Understand and appreciate the values of each generation. That's why I've talked about the 4 different generations to try to help us see their strengths in each one. And next one, it's hard for many people. Conflict can be good if managed correctly. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be difference of opinion. But you, as a supervisor, have to kind of arbitrate, mediate, work things out so people can work as a team, work as individuals, but work together. Conflict resolution is actually a problem-solving process. If you grew up in a home in which there was lots of conflict and you're not comfortable with it, wow, you're going to have issues in the workplace because there's lots of disagreements in the workplace. It just happens. So you as a supervisor have to combine the perspectives, the identity of a common goal, a common solution, present it in a way that all generations will be able to buy into it, not just this is a policy, do it. We've all had a supervisor who said that, and it did not make us happy, and it did not help us comply the way we needed to. If you have a new policy, monitor regularly, see how it's going. Ask your workers, how's it working for you? This new program we do where you have to call in when you're in the home, that you have to check in as you're coming in the morning, changes in documentation. Don't just suggest it. Make sure you're reviewing to see if they're doing it. As a supervisor, you must always model respect for the generations, acknowledge the differences. One way is say, Susie's strength is she is #1 on the computer. If I don't know something, I ask her to research it, and within 30 minutes she can give me information. Miss Smith, her actual strengths are more in pulling the team together. If you know what the strengths are, identify them and praise them for those. Acknowledge differences. Somebody's bilingual and can help in the clinic. How wonderful is that? Focus on common goals, mutual support, managing conflict, and monitoring ongoing. Okay, we have planned to have a final video. I don't think we have time. Okay, I want you to see if this workplace looks like something that could occur at ADPH.
So, Marathon Industries, give me a breakdown.
It's a B2B company that provides cloud storage for Fortune 500 companies.
Chet, what did the market research turn up?
What? Oh, I Googled them, but the results were weird.
You didn't use the market research database that we spend thousands of dollars a month on and that you were specifically trained to use.
I quit. This job is different than I thought it would be.
Stop. Does this situation look familiar? A new type of worker has entered the workforce. They're called millennials, and they're terrible. Today, I'm going to teach you all about this new breed of worker so you can avoid misunderstandings in which you feel the need to fire them immediately. In the first reimagination we just saw, Mary makes the classic mistake of not reassuring Chet while offering overflowing amounts of praise.
Chet, you were so smart to use Google. That's the perfect way to start the research. You're so smart.
Great job.
So the conference call is scheduled for 10:30, so that we're on the same page. Let's do a pre-call about 9:30 a.m.
I don't understand. Noodles in the morning. 9:30?
Sheryl Sandberg here isn't aware time exists before 10:30 a.m. To her generation, there's a mysterious dead zone after 4 a.m. and before they stroll into work 40 minutes late with their iced coffee. So take that into consideration for scheduling.
It's very difficult for me.
Fine, I'll take the call myself.
Oh, thank you.
Nailed it.
Here's that report that you asked for.
Oh, thanks.
Morgan did exactly what was asked of her. Nothing more, nothing less. She expects a raise and promotion.
Thanks. Junior Executive Manager of Data Consulting.
Is that better than Assistant Manager of Junior Accounts?
Yes.
Oh my God, thank you. I'm gonna go call my parents.
Now you're getting it.
I need to take work off tomorrow for a mental health day.
Did you know millennials can actually be exceptionally creative with reasons why they need to miss work? These eccentric excuses are normal to them, and they will be to you too.
Sure, that's a normal thing.
Hi, I know I only get 10 days paid vacation, but that wouldn't count a 3-week Argentinian surf spirit quest, right?
No, why would it?
Oh.
Why don't you go home early today?
That's it. Any questions? Why even hire millennials? Oh, right. Well, millennials comprise 19% of the workforce. If none of them worked and their parents supported them, it would cripple our economy and China would take over. So unfortunately, it's your civic duty to employ them. Trust us, we want to fire them all too, but we can't.
Okay, I hope everybody realizes that that is a very facetious film, but it's to make us smile and see humor. The positives and strengths that millennials bring are fantastic. We do have to adapt our supervision style. We do have to try to encourage some issues that may not be what they want, but whenever we can accommodate, it's really important to do so, because the more happy they are in the workplace, the more likely you are to retain them. And retention of employees is so important. And the knowledge that they bring, I think this new generation is going to make so many positive changes in the workforce, in the environment, that I'm really looking forward to sitting back and watching the changes they do. So hopefully, if you get in a work situation and something comes up and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's my millennial talking, then you can sit back and say, wow, how can I view this a little differently? Because, you know, he really is smart and he does so many wonderful things. I've got to look at it differently. So sometimes as supervisors, we need an attitude adjustment. So I hope this presentation and these fun videos that are a little facetious will help you see there are ways we can smile at this. I've shared these videos with parents who are pulling their hair out with their adult children who are millennials, and they'll come back and say, wow. So that's why they view the world so differently. And I think working together as supervisor and supervisee, these issues can be handled in a positive way, and keep your sense of humor. That really helps a lot. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheila. I appreciate it. Do we have any questions in the audience or online? Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we will see you next time on the Alabama Public Health Training Network.